everyone, I'm Kevin Elson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from around the world. After initially being approved in June by the lower house of Congress in Argentina, the Argentinian Senate voted against a bill that would have decriminalized abortion during the first 14 weeks of pregnancy. The senators voted 38 to 31 against the measure early August 9th, following a 15-hour debate. At a mass on the eve of the vote, Cardinal Mario Poli of Buenos Aires acknowledged in his homily that the church needs to do more to accompany pregnant women who find themselves in tough situations. In a statement after the vote, the bishops' conference hailed the vote but said, "We are facing great pastoral challenges to speak more clearly on the value of life." In news from the Vatican, after Pope Francis's general audience this past week, the Pope met briefly with Grammy Award-winning musician Sting and his wife. Sting has composed music for a show about Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. Rome Reports has more from the Paul VI Audience Hall.
It wasn't the end of a concert, but rather of the Pope's public catechesis. Upon concluding, the Holy Father was greeted by Sting and the singer's wife, Trudy Styler.
Thank you very much for your work.
Styler was visibly moved. Pope Francis asked them to pray for him, and she assured they already did.
Pray for me, don't forget.
We pray for you all the time. We love you.
When the Pope thanked Sting for his work, he was probably referring to the singer's contribution to the Giudizio Universale spectacle, which is shown mere feet from the Vatican and allows pilgrims to explore the history of the Sistine Chapel and Bible.
Sting wrote the main theme to that production, a contemporary take on 13th century sacred music produced and sung in Latin. The work was recorded in London with an 18-piece choir. The Pope's pop singer said he was well schooled in the music of the church as a child, and this was an opportunity to reacquaint himself with the sacred music that had such a powerful influence on his life and work as a musician. More news from around the world. In the Gansu province of China, 2 underground parish priests have been removed after being accused of holding a summer camp for a youth group at their church. According to UCAnews.com, the 2 priests were serving in the Tianshui diocese. The Municipal Ethnic and Religious Affairs Committee of Tianshui sent a letter asking the local branch of the state-controlled Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association to send personnel to replace the priests who were accused of holding the camp for the Bosco youth group at the church and sent back to their hometowns. According to a source, some people in the government want to break the current situation. They don't want to allow the underground church to exist and must convert it to be open, because only Tianshui in northwest China still has an underground community. And finally in the news, a discovery by a parish priest in Rome shows the lengths in which some were able to hide Jews from the Nazis in churches around Italy during the Nazi occupation. Rome Reports has more on this one particular church and its amazing story of trying to keep their guests alive.
The ancient Jewish community in Rome did not avoid the Nazi madness. Following a big raid in October 1943, many Jews were forced to live in hiding, some in churches like this one, St. Joachim, in the center of Rome. The parish priest at the time, Marco Antonio Dresino, hid 3 Jews in a nook of the roof for 9 months. It was an episode that he kept secret until Father Ezio Marcelli decided to investigate it 40 years later.
This story has been hidden for 40 years. Nobody knew. When I arrived in Rome, someone said, "Here we save Jews." Then I thought, I want to understand what happened here exactly.
The Nazis entered churches and carried out many checks. To avoid being found, the Jews opted for an extreme measure, blocking the entrance. This way, nobody could enter or leave.
To communicate with their families, they tied their messages to a thread and lowered them down through a hole in the roof of the church. To receive food, clothes, newspapers, they used this window through which even people could pass.
Jewish refugees had a deep respect for Catholics. For this reason, one of them drew on the walls of their hiding place the face of Christ crowned with thorns, the suffering of the 3 companions, and the sweetness of the Virgin and Child that offered the refugees tenderness and comfort during difficult times. This anguish is also reflected in this image of a man sitting with his hands covering his face. These tense moments were not lacking. For example, one day while the parish priest picked up one of his messages, a group of Nazis entered for a check. The priest threw himself to the ground as if he were praying, and the soldiers did not notice.
The Jews were saved thanks above all to 4 people: the parish priest Antonio Dresino, a French nun called Margarita Venez, who was well known in the neighborhood and could easily get food, clothes, or whatever they needed. Also an engineer named Pietro Lestini, who had the idea of the wall so that nobody could enter. He was helped by his daughter, university student. She was in charge of taking the letters of the Jews to their relatives.
In 1995, all 4 were recognized by the State of Israel as righteous among the nations for their help in protecting persecuted Jews. Well, that's all the information we have for you this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week. Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.